Dogs make the best companions for humans. This podcast aims to help make humans better companions for their dogs. Welcome to the Baru Podcast, a modern lifestyle podcast for dogs and their people. I'm your host, Charlotte Bain. I've been caring for other people's dogs for more than 15 years. And while I've learned a lot in my career, I definitely don't know it all. So I've collected an ever-evolving roster of amazing dog people, and I learn new things from them all the time. In this episode, I have a lovely and fun chat with Alexis Devine, the woman behind the viral sensation, What About Bunny? Alexis is the dog mom of Bunny the talking sheepdoodle, and now Otter the standard poodle. Inspired by speech pathologist Christina Hunger's own work with her own dogs, Alexis began training her pup Bunny to speak using an augmentative and alternative communication device, otherwise known as sound buttons. We chat a little bit about the science behind these buttons, and Alexis shares with us her journey with Bunny and Otter and the lessons she's learned along the way. Let's jump into the chat. Really happy that you joined me today, and I'm really interested in, as I said before, learning about your journey with Bunny and now Otter. And was it something that you thought of before getting Bunny, using the augmentative and alternative communication devices or the buttons, and where that inspiration came from?
Yeah, so I had wanted a dog for a very, very long time, and it hadn't been situationally appropriate. The time came when the timing was right. I was in a stable home, stable job. The stars had sort of aligned, right, where I was able to bring a dog into my life. And I was very, very, very excited about that. And so I was doing a ton of research. And one of the things that came across my feed while I was researching was Christina Hunger's work. And she is a speech language pathologist down in San Diego, California, that had started using these buttons to communicate with her own dog, Stella, in this way. And I was like, well, that's incredible. And my goal, as I had decided to bring a dog in my life, was to have the most connected relationship possible with the best communication possible.
Right.
So this naturally felt like a way to enable just another form of communication that could potentially deepen our connection. So before Bunny even came home, I had, one of those boxes of buttons waiting for her. There was an outside button by the door. But then, at the same time, I was investigating all of these other avenues like enrichment toys, and training videos, and learning how to train, because I'd never trained a dog or any other animal for that matter before. So yeah, it was definitely something that I found before bringing Bunny home, and was, had sort of no expectation of success because I'm not a scientist. I'm not a speech language pathologist or a dog trainer. But I am tenacious and I'm curious. And so I thought I'd give it a shot.
So Bunny was your first dog ever?
I had a couple of dogs growing up, but they were family dogs. And I wasn't really involved in the same way that I am with raising Bunny and Otter.
Yeah. The relationship's not the same as it is when you're growing up. Yeah. And so they talk about the buttons briefly. Those were created initially to work with children who had speech or developmental issues with speech and speech therapy. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, I think the connection was made by Christina because there were buttons similar to that she was using in her practice to help nonverbal kids. And, I think they probably have other applications as well, but that's an application that, AAC has been used with nonverbal people for a really, really long time. So I think that was one way that this form of AAC had been used. And I'm sure there are other ways. There was actually Alexander Rossi in the early 1990s did something very similar with his own dog, Sophia. So he got some portable buttons and tried to see if with arbitrary symbols on them, she could learn to use these 6 buttons to communicate. And she did very well. And he wrote a paper on it, published it, A Dog at the Keyboard, I think in 94 or 95, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Because if we can teach a dog to ring the bell to go outside, it's a more basic version, right, of what,
it's exactly
what you're teaching. Yeah.
Yeah.
So So how did Bunny react to the buttons in the beginning? Was she really into them? Or how did you start the process with her, I guess?
Yeah. So, she had no opinion about the buttons initially.
Yeah.
I don't know what this is. It doesn't look like a toy. Otter immediately thought they were a toy. So I think a lot of that depends on your dog. So I had to build interest. And one of the ways that I built interest with Bunny was by doing some paw targeting exercises. So, I would have like a Tupperware lid, and then I would have a treat underneath it. And then, she wants the treat. So she'll like try and get it. And one of the things that she would try in order to get it was pawing at it. As soon as she would paw at that Tupperware lid, I would mark it with a yes, and then I would reward her with a treat. Many, many repetitions of that. And we began generalizing that by using things other than the Tupperware lid, like a book and a hand and a stuffy and all that. And what that did is it encouraged her to use the behavior of putting her paw on things as something that she would regularly offer. Like if I'm looking at her, if we're having a moment, we're connecting, and I'm expecting something from her and she doesn't know what it is, one of the first behaviors that she will try will be to put her paw on something. Mm-hmm. So I primed her for button pressing in that way, by teaching her that touching things with your paw gets a reward. So then we did exercises where without the treats, since I had put that behavior on a cue, which was paw, I could take her over to the buttons and say paw, and she would press the button, which then said outside, and the reward would be to go outside, which is something that she liked. Right. So I'm not conflating the two, right? I'm not using treats. I'm not teaching her that pressing a button gets a treat, because then she can press any button for a treat, and the buttons, it's harder for our learners to sort of take in the real or the desired meaning of the button, if that's the case. And we progressed from there. And then every time I would press the button, before she was pressing it herself, I would say outside, outside, outside. And then I would wait a few minutes or a few seconds and see if she would press it. And if she didn't, that's fine. I would press outside again. We would go outside and we'd have a little outside party. And then we'd come back inside and I'd say all done outside. And so, a lot of repetition, a lot of patience, and a lot of encouragement, and just like a whole lot of like excitement and positivity, because I really wanted to build up the experience to be something that was like really fun, and an engaging sort of two-way interaction.
Do you think that using the buttons has helped Bunny gain confidence? She's only like 2 now, right? She's 3. God, where'd the time go?
I know. I'm saying the same thing myself. I'm not sure. She's like a very, very nervous dog in general. I think it has been very important for her in terms of knowing that she has options in how to communicate and get her needs met. I don't know if necessarily it's helped her confidence. I think more so it's allowed her to explore concepts with me and communicate things to me that maybe she couldn't have before, which has therefore deepened our connection potentially. Right. I mean, I don't know where our connection would be without the buttons, because that's not our journey, but I think how could a process like this not lead to a deeper connection, because you're necessarily spending a lot of time and putting a lot of thought into what they might be wanting to communicate.
Right. I was going to say it seems like it's, which I don't want to say the word labor intensive, because it's not, it's a journey of, discovery, and it seems wonderful and fun and heartfelt, but it seems like a lot of work, right?
I think it definitely can be labor intensive. And there are no rules. This is so new, and everyone's path is going to be different. Some people will be super, super stoked just to have their dog pressing an outside button, right?
Yeah.
And that's not generally going to take too long. I go all in with everything I do. So for me, yes, it was quite a bit labor intensive. I spent a whole lot of time, and luckily I am privileged enough to have had that time. I was self-employed before. I had a jewelry and wearable art business. And then the pandemic hit and I wasn't doing runway shows anymore. I wasn't selling at markets. All the boutiques that I was selling at had shuttered. Custom orders weren't coming in. So I had a lot of free time on my hands. And I used that free time to really pursue this connection and communication goal with Bunny. And a lot of people don't have that luxury. And I get that. So it doesn't have to be labor intensive. It can be, but it doesn't have to be.
So does she voluntarily go when she wants to communicate something with you? Does she voluntarily go and press the buttons, or do you have to prompt her in some form or way to see like, what are you trying to tell me? Or
she 99% of the time she's initiating, because what I found is that if I try and start a conversation with her and she doesn't have anything to say, she's not going to say anything.
Right.
So she'll go up to the board and she'll stand there. She'll wait for my eye contact. I'll look at her and I'll be like, what's up? And then maybe she'll, press a couple of buttons, and then maybe I'll ask for a little bit more information if I didn't understand. And so we sort of go back and forth like that. But yeah, it's mostly her initiating. I try and let her take the reins and model when I can, especially if we're learning a new word or a new concept. I'll be more active with the buttons themselves, trying to use the new word in different ways, in different contexts to help her understand how she could use it.
How do you introduce a concept to her? I understand introducing words, but how do you introduce a concept to her, and how does she respond to that? And also, how do you know what's the process of figuring out what she's actually trying to say?
Okay. So that's like a two-part question.
Question.
Yeah. The concept, like dream, let's take that one, because it's just so illogical to think of being able to talk to a dog about their dreams. So most of the words that I add these days, I add because she is using a word combination that seems to be telling me, seems to be saying that word. For example, she was saying, talk, sleep, night, talk, sleep, over and over and over and over again. And I had shared some of those videos and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And everyone's like, well, maybe you're talking in your sleep. And I wasn't, and Johnny wasn't. And kept a little recorder by the bed to see what was going on at night. Nothing was going on. And so we just couldn't figure it out. And there are a team of researchers and research assistants who are helping analyze all of this data now. And I shared the things that sort of confound me. Well, I share everything with them, but the things that really confound me, I'm like, hey, what are your thoughts on this? And one of them was like, well, it really sort of sounds like dream to me. What if you were to add a dream button, and then next time Bunny is like actively having a dream, you wake her up really, really gently and ask her, what talk, sleep, what dream? Mm-hmm. And so that's what I did.
That gave me chills.
It was very, very cool. She was having an active dream. I walked over to her and I gently, gently touched her. I was like, Lens, are you okay? And she sort of started awake, and I was like, what talk, sleep? What dream? What talk, sleep? And she got up and she walked over to the board and she pressed stranger animal. Having a dream of like some big scary animal like running, So things like that. That's how I add words. Concepts are crazy, and you have to get creative, right? Because there really aren't any rules. Another one, she was saying sound walk and sound tug. And that was another one where I was like, I'm not getting this. What do you think this means? And they're like, well, it sure sounds like talk, like conversation. Like sound walk is literally what she's doing when she's using the buttons, and sound tug, a back and forth, right? Mm-hmm. The back and forth of the sound, that's a conversation. So I added the word talk, and ever since I added the word talk, she stopped using sound walk and sound tug. Ever since I added the word dream, she stopped using night talk, sleep, and talk, sleep, night talk, that sort of thing.
And she just says dream. Is that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's so cool. How did her behavior change when you brought Otter onto the scene? Was she still eager to learn than the same, or was she a bit taken aback in the beginning? I know you implemented it. You brought a new dog into your house, not what you said, about a year ago, 14 months ago.
Yeah. It was last August 1st that Otter came home. And I knew that it had the potential to be pretty challenging for Bunny because she's very, very dog selective and she's reactive. But I also know that when she forms bonds, they're very close, and that oftentimes it just takes her getting over a little hump. So I introduced them very, very slowly, lots of short parallel walks. Otter was behind a barrier, like a visual barrier, so that she could smell him and he smell her, but they didn't have any direct like line of sight or interaction. So just took everything very, very slowly. And at first there was a lot of like, why, and ugh.
Just like a toddler. Yeah.
Yeah. Those were things that Bunny was saying in regards to him. But it didn't actually take as long as I thought it would for her to become acclimated and then for them to become really good friends. And it was a beautiful transition to see. It seemed like Otter started to understand pretty quickly that the buttons had intrinsic value because he was learning through observation that Bunny and I were communicating via the buttons, that Bunny would press a button and then a thing would happen, like she would get to go outside or whatever. So he explored the buttons too. And she would sometimes, say something on her board, like he had an ear infection when he was a few months old. And she pressed smell, ear, something like that.
I was going to ask if she I watch I have a dog care business. And so I watch, how dogs interact all day long. If she was trying to teach him in some form or another to use the board at all.
Yeah. To me, it didn't look so much as like her trying to teach him. Like there wasn't the sort of nonverbal communication I would have expected for that to be the case. Like what I would expect would be for her to press a button or for her to look at him, right? For his eye contact, then press a button and look at him again.
Right, just like you taking over your role.
Exactly. And I didn't see any of that. But she does, have commentary about him, like the ear thing is alerting me to smell ear, alerting me to his ear infection, which I then treated. And the next day, Otter walked over to the board and pressed ear. So there have been several instances of him like directly copying her, which have been pretty fascinating. And then through his adolescence, there was a lot of like chewing on buttons and chewing on file and like me sort of taking a step back from that and waiting for him to like get over that hump of like crazy adolescence. But my approach with him has been a lot more hands-off just generally, because I was interested to see if just through social learning and observational learning, if he would pick up quite a bit, which he seems to have. So I don't know. I mean, maybe at some point my approach will change and I'll focus really hard on teaching him the buttons and helping him learn. But it's been pretty cool to see what he's learned sort of naturally through an environment wherein the buttons are being used constantly.
Right. So you said Bunny's part of a study. I believe it's at UC Davis, San Diego, or UC San Diego. What is that study? And did they approach you, show interest in you, or is it something that you sought them out because you thought she would be a great candidate for the study? So what's the study? How does it work? And what's the goal of the study?
Yeah. So They Can Talk is the study. It's at the Comparative Cognition Lab at UC San Diego. The goal of the study is to determine if so, how and how much animals are capable of communicating in language-like ways. We are in phase 2 or 3 right now. At about 6 months old, Bunny, not me, I came into contact with Leo Trottier, and I don't quite recall how that connection was made, but he is the founder and CEO of Fluent Pet and Clever Pet. And
that's the company that creates the buttons and offers information on how to, and I'll put that in my show notes. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. And he was looking for beta testers for a product he was developing, which was a canine specific AAC device. And up until that point, I'd had my buttons in a grid on this plywood board, not organized in any specific way because I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just like, okay, row of buttons, right? And he is a cognitive scientist. So he's bringing in this element of cognitive science. And I was like, yes, I want some of my decisions to be influenced by cognitive science. That sounds amazing. The study wasn't even, it was just like a pipe dream at that point in time. But I started beta testing this product, rearranged all of the buttons based on the Fitzgerald key into these hex tiles. Okay. And Edith Fitzgerald in the early 1900s, a deaf woman who developed the Fitzgerald key to categorize words based on type so that deaf children could learn syntax and grammar. So ostensibly, they could move through from left to right and create a sentence by the way the words were grouped. So that's how they're grouped now. So instead of having like this giant grid with like just a ton of buttons to sort of wade through, they're all grouped. So I've got my people buttons, my places buttons, my things.
Okay.
So instead of Bunny having to know the specific location of mom in this huge massive button, she can say, okay, this tile right here has my people and mom is in the middle of that tile. So it's just 6 buttons that she's got to, so yeah. And then I've tested every one of their products since. They've been iterating for the last 3 years. And it's been really, really fun to be a part of that. And the study started like a year ago, maybe more than a year and a half ago.
I have no sense of time anymore since this pandemic started.
Oh my gosh. Same. Yeah. I have no idea. But it's been going on for a while now. And they are, collecting researchers and compiling ethics board. And like, I'm not a scientist, so I don't know for sure, but it seems like they're taking all of the right steps.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what they're actually doing in terms of research, the beta testers are not privy to because they don't want to influence us.
Yeah, okay, got it.
Or bias us, but apparently exciting things are happening, and there are a couple of the researchers now that are traveling across the United States that are going into learners' homes to observe them. And, there are a lot of people in the study that have chronic recording now. Like we've got about 10 cameras in our home.
I was going to ask that, like, how do you keep track?
Yeah. And I just send all that data to them to the comparative cognition lab every 2 weeks. So, in that way they're, because some of the comments I get is like, oh, it's all cherry picked. Of course you get like these 30-second clips. You can make it say whatever you want. Like, yeah, but the scientists are getting the other 9 hours of my day too. So yeah, it's exciting.
So many new, exciting things happening with dog cognition and the science behind it and what we're learning. Circling back to the kind of the haters saying you only have, a certain, lack of a better term, but the haters saying you can cherry pick a certain, segment of what she says and put that up on social media. I know you've chronicled this whole process on social media, right? How do you navigate that? Because it seems a little stressful and overwhelming.
It was very stressful and overwhelming at first because I hadn't spent enough time on social media platforms with a large following to ever have experienced that kind of like negativity before. So I didn't know how to cope at first. And I tried to like respond to them and like convince them otherwise. And finally I learned that, trolls are just trolls. And, there's so much data out there right now that they can read about, but I mean, I feel like most of the people have their own sort of biases anyways, and that's fine. Like my job is not to prove anything. My job is to explore connection and communication.
Yeah.
I get to do the fun part and the scientists get to do the science. And I think that's really important, actually. I think one of the things that happened with some of the prior animal language studies is that the scientists realized that in order to see the best results, they had to have really close connections with the subjects, right? But once they had those really close connections, it was very difficult for them to stay impartial. So, and like Bunny and I we've like developed this dialect. Like there is no doubt in my mind that I am biased. There is no doubt in my mind that, that at times I make more out of something she says than I should. How could I not?
And we do that with our human connections also.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I think one of the really great things about this study is that you've got all of these people, thousands and thousands of people who are really dedicated to understanding their animals better and to connecting with them,
Mm-hmm.
who don't have to be involved in a scientific capacity at all.
Mm-hmm.
And all of that data gets sent to scientists whose judgment isn't clouded by their personal connections with these animals.
You're going on a journey yourself of learning more about animal behavior and training and all the things. You want to briefly talk about that? And on a personal note, I'd love to know what courses that you're taking.
Oh, yeah. In this last year specifically, I've taken, I don't know, like dozens of courses. Probably my favorite was the legs course by Kim Brophy. I'm now a licensed family dog mediator.
Mm-hmm.
I love looking at behavior through an ethological lens.
Right.
It feels really, really holistic and big picture to me. So that I loved that course.
I have not. I've started reading her book. I have not taken any of her courses, but I know she's fantastic and she's definitely on my list. So
yeah, I would highly recommend it. I really like that one. I also took Michael Shikashio's masterclass Aggression in Dogs.
He was just on the podcast today. Actually, he came out. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he came out today.
He's so nice.
He's so nice. Yeah, and so smart and so great to talk to. But I'm sorry, I keep interrupting. Yeah.
No, that's okay. Loved his course. I hadn't seen like case studies before in any of the courses I'd taken. And that was one of the most helpful bits that I saw, because I'm a very visual learner. So like, you can hear someone talking about differential reinforcement, blah, blah, blah. But then when you see somebody using it and saying, okay, this is how it's applied, it just made a lot more sense to me. Yeah, it was just really, really helpful for me to see from like start to finish how he was able to modify behavior in a specific case. Anyways.
Yeah. He's fantastic.
Yeah, no, he really is brilliant. Yeah. What else did I take?
If anybody, it's good for me. It's also good for listeners if there's, to know that there's resources and whatnot out there. If you want to, learn more about the science of dogs.
Oh my gosh. Yes. FDSA has amazing courses. Dr. Amy Cook,
I don't know what that is. What is that?
Fenzi Dog Sport Academy.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Dr. Amy Cook has, Playway, which is amazing, and Active Management, which are amazing. They're both incredible for all dogs, but particularly for reactive dogs. Let's see. I don't know. I've taken like a dozen courses that I can't remember the names of now. Oh, Circle Method of Loose Leash Walking was really cool. Because I am lucky to live in a place where I don't often have to have my dogs on leash. Yeah. So loose leash walking is not a thing that we practice regularly.
Right.
Circle method was, So circle method was one of the ways that was like, it felt like a slightly quicker solution than some of the other methods. Anyways, Otter's still terrible at loose leash walking, but he's also a crazy adolescent. So
yeah, he's a crazy adolescent.
We'll get there.
On a side note, when you take your pups out when you have to take them out in the world, do you, are they celebrities amongst your neighborhood? Do people get really excited when they see Bunny and Otter or?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, not so much in the community, but like in our little zone where we live. But like in the world at large, they do. But like I said, Bunny's reactive and she's not comfortable in situations like that. And anytime we go out in public with her, people just charge. So we kind of just like take her places where she can do like snifaris and just hang out with us and be free and not worried about other dogs or other people at all.
That's great. Yeah.
And then Otter's curious and he's pretty pro-social. So we'll go to like markets with him and he'll get recognized and he seems to enjoy it a lot more than Bunny does.
Has Otter, being so social and being a puppy, helped Bunny become less like leash reactive or nervous out in the world? Or is it not had no effect whatsoever? Or do you take them out separately? Because sometimes with a dog with reactive tendencies, or you need to separate them so they can give you the right kind of attention too.
Yeah, I give them individual walks, and if we're going someplace in public, I just bring Otter, and then I'll give Bunny her own like decompression walk. Like she just needs all the decompression.
Yeah.
She's tightly wound.
Yeah.
And there were, I think 3 months, maybe 3 months, about a year ago, where I put her in a muzzle every time we went out. It was really bad. And I haven't had to put her in a muzzle in a long time now. And I think so much of that, it was just about me really considering her environment and really considering her needs.
Muzzles are not a bad thing. We just talked about that in the episode. With Michael Shikashio today. Yeah, they're an excellent tool to help keep your dog safe and help keep other people safe. And
absolutely. And there's so many reasons that a dog could wear a muzzle. Maybe they eat poop. Maybe they eat
I do have a dog that I care for that eats a lot of poop, and he's 4 now, and he still eats poop nonstop. So yeah.
Oh, no.
It's not just he didn't just grow out of it. Yeah.
Okay, I have a very gross story, which I don't know will make it on. So Otter only eats human poop.
Interesting.
Only eats human poop. And we went on this road trip over spring break, and we were in the middle of nowhere, and we were camping on BLM lands, and we found like this flat patch in the middle of nowhere where it looked like some ranchers maybe had camped, and it was like dark when we got there. So we set up our tent and went to sleep. Woke up the next morning. It was like 20 degrees. It was very, very cold. Everything was frosted. Open the tent, Otter goes and does his potty, whatever. And I look around, there's like deer legs everywhere. Like they had been hunting. I was like, oh no.
Oh my God. Oh,
like, oh my gosh, Otters. No, not Otter. No. But yeah, there were like a few deer legs and I was like, oh, Otter's definitely going to get those and chew on them. And he comes running up with like this giant rock in his mouth. I was like, why are you carrying a rock? And he like dropped it in my hands, and I was like, what's this? And like a fudgesicle, outside became soft and melted on my fingers while the floor was still hard. It was not a rock. It was not bark. It was human poop.
That's the worst. Yeah, no one wants to deal with human poop. No. Yeah.
And how do I know that it was human poop? Because there's a tiny piece of toilet paper on it.
Oh my God. Well, of course, I'm sure it smelled, whatever that guy or gal was eating smelled fantastic. Yeah, that's a really gross story.
It was so gross. Some random rancher's poop is on me. It was awful. And that's not the only time that's happened. But yeah.
He likes poop. The guy likes poop.
I like poop. Yeah.
All right. I lost my train of thought here.
Sorry.
Well, we can circle back a little bit to Bunny and some of what were some of the unexpected struggles that you had during this whole process?
With the button specifically, or just with Bunny as a dog?
All the things, anything you want to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think like the biggest challenge with the buttons is that there wasn't a framework by which I was moving forward. I was just really guessing at everything. And I'm a very curious individual, and I'm a very creative individual. So I enjoyed that process, but at times, I've always considered myself a hopeful skeptic. So at times I was like, this isn't what I think it is. So I've been on this sort of emotional roller coaster of like, oh, I'm reading so much into this. And then she'll just say something that is like so spot on. Like, okay, your body told me the same thing that your buttons were telling me, the same thing that the environment is telling me. And there are just so many instances of that, that it's hard to say there's not something really interesting going on. And it's easy and safe, I think, to say that I don't know what's going on. But something pretty interesting is going on. So that's been a struggle, just because I like to have answers and I like to know things. And I can't. It's really just like, let's go explore some super foreign territory and see what happens. Yep.
You have to kind of just be in the moment and let it unfold as it unfolds.
Yeah.
Just the hardest lesson, I think, in life, across the board.
I'm a total control freak, perfectionist. Yeah. Like I want to know, and it's so funny. Bunny and I are so much the same. She really needs predictability. She needs to know what's going to happen. Sudden environmental contrast freaks her out, and me too. So we're both just like, okay, what's going to happen next? Deep breaths.
Right.
But yeah, so in terms of the buttons, I think that's been our biggest challenge. And then in terms of like having a relationship with my dog, like and this is going to sound really naive, but I hadn't had a dog before. And I kind of had this tabula rasa notion, right? Which is so bonkers that, you get a dog and then you're like really nice to them and you teach them things and nothing super traumatic happens to them. And they turn out to be a quote unquote good dog. And that's just not the way things happen. Like there's so much else at play. There's genetics, there's the mom's learning history, environment, epigenetics, their self, like what are their individual quirks? Are they in pain? Do they have something cognitively going on? There's just so many other elements. So it took me a while to not feel like a failure when I started to realize that Bunny was reactive. Because I was like, I must have done this.
Well, that's a common thing. That's a common feeling. When you have a dog that is exhibiting behavior that you don't understand or is frustrating because there's shame around it, that you've done something wrong, and then you think other people are staring at you like that you've done something, that somehow you're a bad dog mom because your dog is reactive or whatnot. So you're not alone in those feelings, as you know now. But
and I don't feel that way anymore. I mean, I just feel a ton of compassion and empathy for her because I relate so much to those feelings. But tied up in the complicated feelings that one can have around a reactive dog are having these sort of expectations of what your life is going to look like. And you sort of have to mourn the loss of those expectations, right? Bunny was going to go everywhere with me. She's going to be my emotional support animal. We're going to go to like cafes, parks. We're going to hang out with friends. She doesn't want to do any of that stuff. And that's okay. But I really wanted that for us. So, I had to come to terms with that on my own and adjust my expectations. And alongside of that was like really getting to know her and understand her deeply. And now, I mean, I loved her then, I love her now, but now I just have all the compassion and all the empathy, and I would never put her in an environment that makes her uncomfortable. And there's sort of like grieving a loss, and there's like frustration, and sometimes there's regret, and sometimes there's anger, and then there's like sad, like there's all these emotions, and then there's like this deep compassion and empathy and love. So I think that part of the journey was sort of unexpected for me. I just thought like I'd have a dog and we'd be besties. That's what it's like, right? And it's so much more complicated than that because they're sentient, complicated beings. They have these huge rich emotional and cognitive lives that we don't really know much about. So beginning to learn about that has been one of the greatest joys of my life.
I love that. And that's what one of the interesting things about these buttons are. And I know they're still working on the science behind that, but because we can look at a dog and we know that they're having these, and if we just look at a dog's body language, we can know they're having certain feelings. But how is the science showing that the buttons are actually corresponding with that? Do we know yet? Or
I don't think the science is showing any of that yet. So for me, that was one of the things that felt the most intuitive, actually, because like you said, we can tell through their body language, sort of what they're feeling. Obviously, we're not going to both, like you and I are not going to both experience sad in the same way. Neither will our dogs experience sad in the same way that we do, but you can kind of capture an approximation of mad or happy based on their body language or based on your current emotional experience, and take that opportunity to model. And that's what I did. And it seemed to work out really well because she uses them in contextually appropriate ways. She's got soft, wiggly, loose body language, open mouth, soft ears and eyes, and like a swishy wag. She'll press happy, right? If she sees a bird outside and she barks and she gets all stiff and she's got a high flagging tail, she'll use concerned or mad. So that part actually felt quite intuitive. And that was another thing. That's another thing that people say to me. They're like, "Oh, it's anthropomorphization," and I think there's huge danger in not anthropomorphizing, or at least not acknowledging that.
It's a fine line.
It's a fine line. It is a fine line. But I think it's really, really important to acknowledge that they have deep emotional experiences. You see them, especially in a reactive dog. They've got like really broad spectrum of emotional experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the most exciting things about these buttons for me is her ability to tell you that she's like in pain, because that's one of the most often overlooked things that we know or we see in our dogs. Sometimes when they're exhibiting, and I've touched on this in other episodes, reactivity or they're really good. They're masters at hiding pain, when they have a tummy ache or whatever. So her ability to point out, I remember there was one, and I think it was early on, where she had a foxtail in her paw. It's so exciting for them to be able to, if moving forward, if we can have that sort of conversation where it's, and also so easy for veterinarian to help. I mean, not to replace veterinarian care, but give some sort of a guideline if you know where your dog is hurting or in pain, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
There wasn't really a question in there other than, yeah.
No, but I completely agree. I think that there's huge potential for us to capitalize on that. I think the trickiest part is that, like, evolutionarily speaking, dogs don't want to talk about their pain, right? Because it's what's the word I'm looking for?
Potential sign of weakness, maybe.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a conflict to their well-being, their safety.
Yeah.
So convincing them to, might be the trickiest part about that. Like, I spent a lot of time like showing her when I was in pain, even just a little bit. Like,
interesting. Okay.
I don't know, maybe it's more okay for her to talk about it if I talk about it a lot, or like I got a scrape or like, a bruise, say, mom, ouch, but yeah, she's told me several times when she was in pain, and two times for foxtails in the paw, once for her ear, another time for a cut on her paw, once like a little cut on her nose, and belly ouch for a while when she had hemorrhagic gastroenteritis.
My guy had that when he was little.
It's brutal.
Yeah. It's brutal. Yeah.
And after that,
he got hospitalized twice for it.
Oh,
yeah.
Poor thing.
Yeah. But he's fine now. Again, he's almost 15. He's fine. We made it through.
Rupert.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's not pretty. And after that, she had some stomach issues for a while, and belly ouch and belly rain. She was
belly rain. What does that mean?
Like diarrhea, I think.
Oh.
Or like gurgles, squirgles, belly squirgles.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. Because then when she was feeling okay too, she'd say belly sunny, which is interesting.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And then I took that we got a new vet. I took that to the vet, and I was like, here are the things that are going on with Bunny. Like, she's reactive, and she had hemorrhagic gastroenteritis, and I think this might be happening and this might be happening. And she told me belly ouch. And the vet was like, she what now?
I was going to say, how did the vet respond?
I was like, she told me belly ouch. All right. And then just sort of like breezed on past that. I think it's going to take, thousands more people being like, yeah, my dog said that they needed to go to the vet, until vets are going to be like, okay, right on. Yeah, we'll test for that or whatever. But yeah, I think there's huge potential in that. That would be amazing if our dogs could tell us when and where they were in pain before it required like severe medical intervention.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing, kind of a fun thing, would just be one of your favorite moments with Bunny, something that she discovered or you discovered about her.
Yeah, one of my all-time favorite moments. We were at our old place. Johnny and I and Bunny were in the living room, and he'd gotten home from work, I don't know, like an hour beforehand. And normally our routine is like he comes home from work and then he hangs out, and then we just like are all, together for the rest of the night.
Mm-hmm.
And that's Bunny's favorite. But he was going to go pick up some takeout. So he left to go get takeout. She immediately went over to the button. She was obviously quite concerned, and she pressed, "We love you. Why went?"
No, she didn't. I'm sure she did.
She did.
Oh.
She did. And I was like, oh my God. And I was like, it's okay. Dad just went to go get some food. Dad, bye. And she pressed Dad, bye. And then came over and settled with me for a while. And then was extra, extra happy when he came back. But really sweet. I mean, it's just, each of those words individually is pretty impactful. Yeah. So yeah, that's one of my favorite moments with her.
That is so sweet.
Yeah. I don't know. I just love getting to know her in as many ways as possible. So it's been a really, really, really fun fun process.
Well, thank you, Alexis. I really appreciate you taking the time. It was a really fun chat.
Yeah, this has been a pleasure. Thank you.
Bye, Otter. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Baru Podcast. I've put links in the show notes for some of the great things we talked about in this episode. And as always, please don't forget to rate us and follow us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow at Baru Pet on Instagram. And if you have questions or comments, or you want to share a story of canine companionship with me, send me an email to charlotte@thebaru.com. Let's chat next week.